Imagine the United States government running out of money. The Treasury is empty, banks are locking their doors, and the president is forced to beg a private billionaire to personally bail out the country. This exact sequence of events played out twice in the nation's history. Between 1836 and 1913, the United States operated completely without a central bank, a Federal Reserve, or any emergency safety net to protect its economy. The country was a rapidly industrializing power, but it was also a high-speed machine running without brakes or structural support. John Pierpont Morgan was the undisputed titan of Wall Street. He built his career by identifying floundering businesses, taking control, and reorganizing them to his exact specifications. His method, known as Morganization, involved firing management and eliminating competition to forge massive monopolies like U.S. Steel and General Electric. By consolidating the nation's core industries, Morgan wielded a level of financial influence that often exceeded that of the federal government itself. This chart shows the U.S. gold reserves in 1895. Panicked investors were draining the Treasury, and when reserves dropped below the $70 million mark, the government faced a total national default. Morgan intervened, using an obscure Civil War-era loophole. He formed an international syndicate to supply the Treasury with 3.5 million ounces of European gold, effectively bailing out the government. To stop the panic, Morgan personally guaranteed that the gold wouldn't immediately leave the country again. He used his dominance over the markets to dictate terms to other banks, stopping the bleeding through sheer intimidation. While the rescue worked, the public was furious. The bailout proved that a single private banker now held more power over the American economy than any elected official. The 1895 crisis exposed a new reality. The survival of the United States Treasury was now dependent on the personal wealth of one man. 12 years later, in 1907, a failed scheme to corner copper stocks triggered another wave of terror. Financial contagion is a chain reaction. Because banks lend out the majority of the money they hold, a sudden rush of withdrawals means even healthy banks can instantly fail when they run out of physical cash. By October, this mechanism had caused trust companies to fail weekly, creating a total freeze in the credit markets. On the streets, citizens lined up in massive crowds, desperate to pull their savings out of banks before they collapsed. This panic eventually reached the center of the economy, bringing the New York Stock Exchange to within minutes of a total shutdown. With the government unable to act, Morgan again stepped into the role of a central bank. He summoned the elite of the New York banking world to his private library. Morgan informed the group that the stock exchange needed $25 million in the next 10 minutes, or the entire financial system would fail. The bankers pledged the money, and the exchange stayed open. That night, a second crisis emerged. A failing trust company threatened to pull down dozens of other institutions. Morgan responded with a ruthless tactic. He locked his library doors and refused to let the city's most powerful men leave until they agreed to fund a bailout, spending the night playing solitaire and smoking cigars while they argued. At 5 a.m., the exhausted and trapped bankers finally signed the contract. The bailout was secured, and the panic subsided. Morgan had halted a national market collapse for the second time in 12 years. His personal authority and the literal lock on his library door achieved a resolution that the federal government was powerless to mandate. The economy survived the panic, but lawmakers were left shaken by how close the nation had come to ruin. Congress was forced to consider a grim possibility. What would have happened if Morgan had refused to help, or if he had died during the peak of the crisis? The United States was now a global industrial power, yet its survival rested on the health and cooperation of one elderly man, a systemic flaw the government could no longer ignore. In direct response to the lessons of 1907, Congress changed the nation's financial architecture by creating the Federal Reserve System in 1913. The Federal Reserve was designed to act as the lender of last resort, automating the exact emergency functions Morgan had performed in his library. The man who saved the American markets twice proved exactly why the country needed to be saved from men like him. His legacy was a system where no single individual would ever hold that much power again.